If it's not written down, it's not guaranteed.
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. We're sitting here in the studio today, and if things are not written down, they're not guaranteed. You just said that. It makes a lot of sense in our world today. It used to be that you could go in and have a handshake deal, but it seems like those days are long over.
That's right. And America is built on contractual law. That's what makes it work. And it used to be that your word was your contract.
Mm-hmm.
You can shake a hand today. If it's not written down and detailed in the fine print, then it's not guaranteed.
Well, we do want the details. And I like to cook in the kitchen a lot, and I can improvise here and there. But if I want to try a new recipe, I try to stick to it so that I know it's going to turn out like it's supposed to turn out, because how do I know if it's going to be good unless I actually follow the recipe? And then if I want to reproduce that, I'm going to have to follow the recipe for that. So, there's a lot of details. If we want to keep track of all the details, it needs to be written down.
And Michelle, I go in and I follow your recipes and it doesn't turn out like yours. And then you ask me, well, did you do this? Well, no. And did you do? No, I didn't do that either. So I didn't follow your recipe. That's why it didn't turn out.
Yeah, everyone has a different style, and that's your style.
And that's why it has to be written down so we can go back and say, this is the way it's supposed to be done.
Right.
This is what we agreed upon. And if it's not agreed upon in writing, then someone else can take advantage of you. And that's why it's so important to have guarantees about our finances.
Yeah. And some people, obviously, you still can depend upon a handshake deal with them, but you have to base it on your knowledge of that person and their history. And we don't always have that with the people that we're working with in business. And so that's why one of the reasons that it's so important to write things down. So that way both parties know what's agreed upon.
I don't know how many of you listening to this read the Babylon Bee, but it is such a satirical form of humor that you need to check it out if you haven't. I was recently reading it, and it talked about the 10 things that will keep you out of heaven. And that spurred me to think about the 10 places that are promised to be safer than whole life insurance, where you can keep your money. But again, we're talking about contracts and guarantees here. So we're going to be a little satirical today and go through some of those things that people say that are safer than whole life insurance to keep your money.
So satire is a form of humor.
It is.
And in order to be humorous, all humor has to have some elements of truth. And
Yes.
so we're going to go through, as we talk about these things today, there's going to be some truth mixed in with it. So we just have to go through and analyze things and look at them and decide what is funny and what is guaranteed and what is going to be valuable information for us. And that way we're not being the jester handling our money.
That's right. And you sent us a quote on this the other day about how humor has to have an element of truth. It was a really nice quote. I don't have it in front of us here today, but that's it has to apply to our life, have an element of reality in order to be humorous. Mm-hmm. And so satire, we're going to have an exercise in that today. So one of the places that people say that is better than a good place to keep money is in precious metals.
So like silver,
Yeah,
and gold.
gold,
And,
titanium even.
Okay.
Platinum.
okay, so
things
should
like
we all
that.
run out and buy precious metals? Well, maybe. Maybe not. So let's talk about this.
I think you have to understand that precious metals is an investment.
Yeah.
It's not a savings account. And so it's dependent on what happens to the market. And if the market goes up, just like any other investment, then you could make money. That doesn't mean you will, because it depends on how you are owning precious metals. Mm-hmm. If you own them physically, then you've got a storage issue and a liquidity issue. I remember Nelson Nash used to say, when people say, well, I'm going to put my money in precious metals, he said, how did you pay to get into this event? With your precious metals? You've got to change them into a currency that is being used at the time. And when you do that, you lose the growth on your precious metals. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the reasons that whole life insurance is better than precious metals, not necessarily because it will make more, because it's more liquid
Yeah.
And it allows you to get that currency that is being traded right now out of your policy very quickly.
And precious metals can be very timing dependent. Like if you purchased precious metals, 10, 15 years ago, you probably haven't seen that much appreciation overall, and you went through a period where those metals were down then.
Well, that certainly
quite a little
happened
bit
with
as well.
us. I mean, I have silver that I bought, 12, 15 years ago that has never reached the price it was back then. Does that mean that someone else hasn't been able to manage making money in silver? I'm not going to say that because we have clients that say they have. So that means that I just don't understand precious metals well enough to be investing in them.
Yeah, and still, even though they have been productive with it, there's still an issue with storage
And liquidity.
and liquidity. Yes.
Yeah, and so some people say, forget about the storage issue. You can buy, a representation. Let somebody else store that. Buy a fund that invests in silver or gold.
And there'll be a
But
fee
then-
with it.
Yeah, but then why are you doing that? Right? Because if you're not actually taking physical delivery of the material, that defeats the reason that people often invest in precious metals to begin with, which is kind of a doomsday scenario. What if the whole system goes up in smoke? Then at least I have my precious metals. If you don't have physical control of those, then you've lost that element of it. But you did get rid of the storage issue. But how valuable is that as an investment? Then you gotta weigh that in the overall picture.
That's true. So something else that people always are pushing, and they talk about, well, my 401k, I'm putting my money in my 401k because it's promised that it's going to give me this much money in retirement.
Or they hope it will. They hope
Yeah,
it'll
there-
give them a certain amount.
There
in
is no
retirement.
guarantees in a
Yeah.
401k
Right.
except that you have to pay a certain fee, and and if you do that, your employer will match it. That's the only guarantee.
Yeah, and everybody's excited about getting the tax deferral, but that creates a bigger account on paper. But a lot of people, as they're looking at that big number on paper, they do see a bigger number, but not all that money is theirs. Because in order to get it in the future, they are going to have to pay taxes. And of course, how liquid is the money in a 401k for your everyday needs between now and retirement? Because you would have to pay a 10% penalty to get to it for a lot of purposes.
Well, and this is the big issue with 401ks. In 2012, the average American 401k balance was about 75,000, almost 76,000. Today, as of May the 24th, we've got the average balances of 103, almost 104,000.
Okay, so that's up.
So that's a gain of about 0.28%. Even though contributions over the last 11 years have increased significantly. And so has it kept up with inflation? No, because inflation has been over 3% over those last 11 years.
Interesting.
So is it giving you more purchasing power in the future by getting the tax deferral today in your 401k, or is it not?
That's a good question, because obviously during those last how many years was that?
It's
we're
11
looking at?
years.
So during the last 11 years, you have some people that are contributing more to their 401ks. That their accounts are going up. You have some people that are withdrawing from their 401ks in retirement, and so their balances are going down. And yet overall, the average balance, you're saying, has not kept up with inflation, even though contribution limits have gone up.
That's correct.
Interesting.
And so this is why government now is thinking about, and several states have already done this, is making the 401k contribution mandatory. As soon as you get employed, you're enrolled in it. You don't have a choice. And but is that going to help? Because this is based on the speculation of market returns. And so it may or may not help.
Okay, so I want to get a word in edgewise. So I'm often frontline on the phones talking to people as they call in and say, I really want to find out more about whole life insurance. And so I'll ask them questions about their finances, and, sometimes what they're saving will come up, or if they're participating in a 401k. And I hear a lot of people groan. And I still have people that say, I do not want to talk about 401ks because they remember 2008, or they were they had 401ks in 2008 when they lost their balances. And I remember we had a friend who used to say 401ks became 201ks. And if you were ready to retire at that point, suddenly half of what you had was gone. Or even what you thought you had was gone. You still had to pay tax on it. So
even here in 2022, people that had 401ks, if they were going to retire this year,
They lost 23%.
they've had a hitch in their plans because now their accounts are down. And see, the problem is if they retire and start pulling income from those accounts while they're down, now they lose the potential if the market does come back.
So we're really talking about here what is guaranteed and what isn't.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with the 401k if you want the match of your employer. If you believe that the market is going to turn out better for you in the future, there's nothing wrong with speculating like that. Yeah. But we're talking about the safety and the guarantees that whole life provides versus this.
Yeah.
And there's no comparison about the guarantees.
Yeah, and so these tools that we're talking about here, these are financial tools. They're not inherently good or evil in and of themselves, but get any one of them too much out of balance and you can be in a bad situation.
And Tom, what you said too is so true. What you believe matters. And if you can use some of these investments in a very productive way and you believe the market is going in that direction, you have the confidence for it, then that's going to put you in a better position. Now, the market may still go south, but you also have to think about what you believe in. It's really important. Yeah. All right. So what other good tools, or excuse me, what other financial tools do we have out there that may be good,
Well, I think one that's really common, especially among Christian circles, is pay off your house as soon as you can so you don't lose a bunch of interest. Because that is going to save you money. And then you'll have this big investment in your house, which, by the way, is the largest single purchase or investment anybody in America makes on average, is the purchase of their home. But does that really provide you a return on your money? That is the question. And Robert Shiller...
As an investment, you mean?
As an investment. Yeah. Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, says no. Since the late 1800s, owning your own home, paying it off early, does not even produce a rate of return when we figure in the interest cost, the mortgage cost, the mortgage settlement cost, the points or anything that you pay there.
Closing
then
stuff.
You've got the insurance to insure the home. Then you've got the maintenance fees, and you've got the property taxes. You add that in on it. The average home does not make a person money.
Interesting.
But it is an emotional investment.
Yes.
And I like to own my own home. I don't want to rent. So is it a bad thing to pay your house off? Well, I think it's a foolish thing to pay your house off early.
Especially if you have a good interest rate.
Because that money can be used someplace else to be more productive than sitting in the mortgage bank. And you still get to use your home and fix it up and make it your own, whether or not you're making a mortgage payment on it or not.
And you're saying that you consider that a foolish move because we have been in that position before. We paid a home off immediately, purchased it with, wrote that check. And that did not buy us financial freedom. Oh, yeah, we didn't have the mortgage to pay, but that didn't stop other expenses. And it greatly hindered our cash flow and our ability to be financially productive in other areas. And so that was a lesson learned. And that's why you speak to that.
Yeah, and you said cash flow, and you read any financial book or guidelines, cash flow is king. If you don't have cash flow, you're going to go belly up pretty quick, regardless of what your net worth is, because the cash flow is what keeps you moving.
That's right.
That's true. Yeah. So another thing that people will say is contribute to your IRA. It's maybe not subject to all the rules and the limitation of investments that a 401k plan might be. You have a wider range of investments, so contribute to your IRA. This one shares some of the downsides of contributing to a 401k, though, because you are still tied to the market. You
are, and if we go back over past 10 years, today's IRA IRA balance, the average IRA balance, does not have the same purchasing power as an IRA balance did 10 years ago
Wow.
because of inflation. It has not kept up with the inflation rate on average. There's some that have done well. There's some that have not done
Sure.
well at all. And so, again, it is how well it is managed and how much you know and believe in what you're doing to make that work for you.
So as we're going through
No
this,
guarantees, sir.
yeah.
True.
And as we're going through this list, this is really reminding me of your book, Tom, Winning Your Financial Game. Because in that book, you kind of have a sports theme where you talk about the offense, the defense, and you get to the scoreboard. And you go through and talk about different financial tools or vehicles, and you go through and point out the positives and the negatives about them. So that's kind of reminding me of what we're doing right here, only there you have it written down and someone can easily read those. So that's Winning Your Financial Game by Tom McPhee. You can get it at, get it on
our Life Benefits store. Go to life-benefits.com. You can go to the store page and get it right there. You can also call our office, 702-660-7000, and we can help you get a copy.
Yeah, and the website again is life-benefits.com.
So a lot of people will say, well, why are you so against IRAs and 401ks and own precious metals and pay? We're not against those things. We're just saying that's not a good starting point because they don't have the guarantees that participating whole life insurance has. Yeah. Nelson Nash used to say, okay, you make the same investment that I make. I'm going to take the money to make the investment for my life insurance. You're going to make that out of a cash purchase from your income or your savings. I'm going to end up with more money than you because I've got the tailwind of the life insurance policy working for me and you don't. Yeah. It's just as simple as that. It's economic value added. We want the growth and we also want the interest on our own money, not just one or the other.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind, with so many investments out there, they're so time sensitive. Like you got to get in at the right time, or there's certain windows of time where you can make a nice return at it, but they're not always such a nice return in those investments. With the life insurance, you have that steady tailwind that you're talking about that continues over a long period of time. So you can count on that long term, even during the windows of time where you can't make as much in the other investments. And so that's the tailwind that gives you the advantage over time.
One of the most important rules in finances is don't lose money. Mm-hmm. And it's more important to have the return of your money than a return on your money. And so that's what life insurance allows us to do. Our money is never tied up in the deal. It's only tied up as far as collateral. It still is growing while we get to use the value of what our money represents because we're using it as collateral to buy the insurance company's money. And so when we do that, even if we do make a bad investment, maybe we buy silver like I did and it never pans out that I can sell it for more than what I bought it for. At least I'm earning interest on the money I bought it with. Mm-hmm. And over time, I will be able to afford to pay that loan back that I bought that silver with, and then I'll have the silver plus my money plus the interest. Otherwise, I would have just spent out the money, and that is the power of owning the whole life insurance. So someone says, well, let's buy the Shark Tank deals. That's a good investment. Well, right off the bat, 27% of contestants saw their deal remain the same after the show on Shark Tank, and 43% saw their deal fall apart. So is that a real high probability that that's going to be a good investment?
Well, let's see. 27% stay the same. 43% fall apart. We're at 70.
I was doing the math too. Wait a minute here.
So 30% of them went up. It doesn't tell us how much they went up.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not a great overall overall outlook, though. If you have a 70% chance of staying the same or losing money, would you do the deal?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It's a good question.
And that reminds me kind of the Black Swan, the book, The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb, where, they talk about every once in a while a really great deal comes across. But, how many deals are going to present themselves before you really find the one that is the right one?
Plenty.
Or can you pick out the right one among all those different deals? That becomes challenging in and of itself. You
Yeah.
might get lucky with that.
Yeah, and remember, some of those deals that have come up on Shark Tank, they've already gone through some vetting and whatnot to even be on the show.
Yes.
So what about the investment of college, of education? How does that pan out?
Go to school, get a college loan. Even take out get student loans if you need to get this college education, because then you're going to be able to pay those student loans back with the increased income. That's the way the pitch goes.
All right. So going to college in and of itself is not necessarily a great opportunity. It is a good opportunity for some people, not a good opportunity for other people. Borrowing money for college, sometimes it works out for some people, not for others. So this really we really have to investigate, is this worthwhile?
8 out of 10 people say that they wish they'd never borrowed money because it's negatively affected their life by borrowing money to go to college. And 66% of Black Americans say that it has affected their mental health.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm curious who did that study and if they did it on other ethnicities, what would they find? That would be interesting to me as well.
That is an interest. And of course, this is referenced. You can go to CNBC. That's the report. That's who's reporting on that. So you can look that report up yourself about how that is negatively affecting Americans today.
Well, and I know that we do have a lot of clients that we work with that have student loan debt that is very high, much higher than what they anticipate their income would be. And does it make an impact on their finances? Absolutely. Does it make an impact on their mental outlook? I would say yes. We see that all the time. And some people learn how to look at that debt and work through it and still build assets for themselves. Other people are just very overwhelmed and we still come alongside and help them. But yeah, it is a challenge. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. Certainly something to be cautious about.
Yeah.
What about the old cliche of I'm just going to buy term and I'm going to invest all the difference of my money? I don't need whole life insurance. That's been around for a long, long time. And if you die, then your beneficiary is going to be happy you bought term insurance. So there is a place for term insurance.
Yeah.
Not condemning term insurance at all here. But we have to understand that more than 99% of all term policies never pay a death claim.
And they're designed not to pay death claims because the insurance company needs to be able to make a profit on the term premiums that they're collecting in order to offset the times when they do have to pay that death benefit.
But the problem is that the invest the difference most of the time never happens. Mm-hmm. Okay. And even if it does happen, research by Dr. Wade Pfau and others have concluded that it doesn't provide the stability and the alternatives in retirement that buying term and investing the difference claims to provide.
Yeah.
It's much better to be building that equity in whole life insurance along the way while you do have term insurance. So you have both, not just one or the other.
So let's go back and just play a quick mental game. If you had done this several years ago, when people thought that you could invest in stocks and bonds and do better than buying permanent life insurance, and so you bought term insurance. Now, fast forward 30 years, your term insurance is expiring, and you realize that bonds here in 2022, they came down with stocks, and it's happened a number of times over the last 20 years. They're not such a hedge against the market corrections when those market corrections happen in stocks. So what do you do now? Your insurance is out, and your investments, the bonds aren't such a buffer in that portfolio as you thought they were going to be 30 years ago because the times have changed and they don't behave the same way anymore. And so now what do? Well, you either buy more term insurance or you try to buy whole life insurance now and when it's going to be more expensive. Yeah. There's a trade-off.
There is a trade-off, yeah.
But if you had bought the whole life insurance years ago, You had built, there's nothing that keeps you from building investments as well. And now, fast forward 30 years, you wouldn't be out of all of your insurance coverage, and you would have a healthier mix of assets.
Well, we're looking at using products for what they were made for. Term insurance was made for younger people that have liabilities. They have a home that hasn't been paid for. They have children that they're raising that haven't gone to school, that haven't gotten married. The average cost of raising a child today is estimated to be about $224,000. Well, if you've got 3 or 4 kids, or even one child, you need term insurance to make sure your spouse doesn't have to foot that bill all by themselves if you're gone. And so term insurance is great. But, after 30 years, like you were saying, John, that term is going to expire. And now instead of paying, $30, $40, $50, $70 a month for term insurance, depending on what kind of coverage you've got, you're going to be paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And the thing is we see this all the time, Michelle. People that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s still want life insurance.
Yes, they do. It's an important part of a healthy financial portfolio. It's a very important part. And whenever I think about buy term and invest the difference, I think of the woman who called us right after you had written Prescription for Wealth, your first book, where you talk about the value of whole life insurance, how it can be used during our lifetime, and what a solid foundation it is. And she called in and said, I used to sell life insurance, and I was a part of a group that talked about buy term, invest the difference. And so I bought term, and we really did invest the difference of what we would have put into whole life insurance.
See, she realized a lot of people did not.
Yes, she knew a lot of people didn't. But she and her husband did. They invested heavily. And right about the time they wanted to retire, those investments that did not have guarantees went south. And so, it just made it really terrible where she could not, they could not liquidate. And I remember she was crying on the phone with you, Tom, saying she wished she could have read your book before you had written it, 10, 15 years earlier.
Absolutely. It happens, and that's just the first story we heard. We've heard so many since then that was early in our life insurance career. And the fact is that term has its place, but whole life is going to be there for your whole life. And people still want life insurance later in life, either for their own personal needs or to settle estates properly. It is a tool that is necessary to keep from losing money to the tax man. It's a way to pass on legacies to your children, to your grandchildren, and to the foundations and your alma mater that you want to, without having to have a bunch of taxes involved in it.
That's right. And this brings us to the next point. People say you got to, there's no way that you can know everything. You're focused on your profession, so you got to trust the professionals on this. But let's look at, just how many of the things that we've talked about here. Professionals tell you to contribute the maximum to the 401k, to your IRA, to pay off your mortgage early, to buy precious metals, to go to college. To buy term and invest the difference. So many of these things that we've talked about are subscribed to by professionals in various roles. Professionals are not right about everything. They can be right about some things. They can provide additional knowledge in a certain field, but you still have to have the wisdom and the understanding to look at what the professional is telling you and to make sure that it fits with the rest of your picture and with your true financial goals.
You still have
and there's
to
no
think.
Replacement. There's
It's like
no
going to the
replacement for
doctor,
that.
and the doctor says, "Oh, you've got a toe infection. We need to cut your foot off." You get a second opinion.
Yeah,
We don't trust the professionals. We use the professionals.
Certainly.
And we can only use the professionals based on the knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
It might not make sense to cut your foot off just because you got a toe infection. Okay? It might not make sense for you to be investing the maximum amount of your money into your 401k if your employer's not matching it, or if you don't believe what the market's going to do. It comes down to you, and self-responsibility is so important. And in our America today, we've neglected our personal responsibility in so many areas, in healthcare, in finance, and even we've thrown away common sense sometimes to follow what the professionals say or the elite say. And I was just reading Whitaker Chambers. He says we've got three classes in America today. We've got the working class, we've got the middle class, and we've got the communists. And the communists are the elites. They're the ones that are manipulating all the things to have all the money come to them so they can control society, because that's what communism is a fascist form of government that when the elites get in power, they tell us all what to do. So we have to be very careful to know what we're doing, use the professionals and the knowledge that they have, but we are the ones that need to decide the bottom line.
That's right.
So the next thing is, you got to take a risk or you lose your chance.
Well, there's some truth to that about
Sure.
with some of the things that we've been talking about today. If you never take any risk and always play it safe, that's no way to live life, because life itself is kind of a risk, right?
Yes, there's risks involved every day.
Right, but what type of risk are you taking? Are you going out and taking wild risk, hoping for some chance of success? Are you just out for the adrenaline rush? That type of risk is not from wisdom.
Yes. A calculated risk is better than a rash risk.
Totally.
Well, we should understand that risk always should be defined as the possibility of loss or injury. And knowing that, then we need to understand that risk comes primarily from not knowing what you're doing. And that's a Warren Buffett statement. That's not my statement, but I agree with it 100%. You eliminate most of the risk when you know what you're doing. And of course, when we're looking at all these things that we're looking at today, what are the guarantees? That is hard knowledge that we can use and count on. Whereas if we're counting on speculation, we are assuming risk.
Yeah. That's great. And then there's a point, kind of goes along with the mortgage payoff that we were talking about earlier. People want to get out of debt entirely so that they could pay cash for everything. But that's not always an efficient way to go. It sounds really nice.
Yeah,
But,
just pay cash for everything.
Right, but you think about it. You pay cash for a house, you still have to pay the property taxes on it. You pay cash for a piece of equipment, you still have to do the upkeep on it from time to time. Life always involves payments. And so there can be a logical time where it makes sense to use credit as one of the financial tools that we have available. And as long as you keep that in wise balance, there are people that use credit way too much and get way out of balance on that side, but there's also people who don't use credit enough and are out of balance on the other side.
Well, the average American household, according to one study, loses about $2,000 a year because they pay cash for things.
Wow.
And I can attest to this, that because we use credit cards wisely and pay them off each month and never pay a balance or an interest rate to the credit card company, we cash in on that. And the last time we cashed in on that was $3,000 that came to our family.
Not bad.
That's like getting a cash discount on things that you're paying, because the credit card gives us points back, or you can get travel points or rewards or whatever.
So while some people say, you got to cut up your credit cards and never use them, if you can use them in a disciplined manner, there's rewards for that.
Yeah.
And then just paying cash for everything never allows you to be. It could restrict you from being able to purchase an asset such as whole life insurance, where your money is growing and earning if you're always just busy paying cash for everything. So we have to look at it with balance. And, people call us all the time wanting to know, hey, is this a good idea? Is that a good idea? Hey, let's look at some balance here. Let's see what you can get to accomplish your long-term goals while still accomplishing short-term goals. Let's see if we can get a balance of both. And can we do everything? Oh, absolutely not. We cannot be a concert pianist and a pro football player at the same time. It doesn't work. Or a brain surgeon and a basketball player. No, you've got to make choices about what you want. But a lot of times we can have more of the things we want if we practice balance.
That's right.
Sir Isaac Newton lost his fortune in 1720 due to the South Sea stock market crash. And in writing about that, he said this: I can predict the movement of the stars, but not the madness of men. And what we do when we get a contract that guarantees something, it's like the movement of the stars. It can be predicted. It can be counted on. It's going to be right there at this moment in the future because the contract says it's going to be there. But when we're speculating and thinking about what the madness of men might be doing in the future, we have to realize that's a risk that we're assuming. And so is it safer to do that, or is it safer to build the foundation and the reserves we need in life insurance and then assume some of those risks?
Yeah.
And try to predict the madness of men.
Yeah. You mentioned the value of life insurance as a financial tool. And the people listening to this show, we talk about that often. And on a recent show, we talked about how many people skip getting the life insurance that they really need because they think it's going to be too expensive. Well, the good news is that Gen Z is recognizing that life insurance is not as expensive, and that they're one of the groups that is more likely to buy permanent life insurance because they're realizing the value that those types of products can provide.
Yeah.
So that's the good news. Truth does ultimately prevail. But there's always a battle between truth and lies. And Charles Spurgeon had a really good quote that offers a lot of perspective on this.
Well, he was talking about the Proverbs that says, those who love lies will perish because they refuse to believe the truth. And he said, if you want truth to go around the world, you must hire an express train to pull it. But if you want a lie to go around the world, it will fly. It is as light as a feather, and a breath will carry it. It is well said, a lie will go around the world while truth is pulling its boots on. And so we have to be careful. We have to look. We have to get guarantees. We have to get contractual guarantees if we want to make sure that what we are financially doing is going to be solid and is going to be there for us in the future and do what we expect it to do.
Yeah, we human beings are wired to learn by listening to the people around us, finding out what's going on. And there's so much information out there in the world. You have to learn by osmosis. You have to be able to learn quickly and to understand what's happening. But that habitual pattern of learning can also lead to a downfall, because if we're always listening to what everyone else is doing around us and everybody else is not doing the best thing, then we become victims of that echo chamber, because we're just hearing what the people around us are doing and basing what we're doing on what they're doing, and they're basing what they're doing on what we're doing. That becomes a problem after a while. How you have to always have an eye out looking for that truth.
That's true.
The truth
Sergeant
is
Joe
what's going
Friday
to change that picture.
Eye out and ear out. Yes.
Sergeant Joe Friday has been reported to have said, "Just the facts, ma'am," even though he's never said that in that way. But the facts are very important, and we've tried to explore some of these facts today in a satirical way, because the facts, if you know them and work with them, can save you a lot of heartache and money over time.
That's right. And going back to that foundation of truth, the best foundation, the source for that truth, goes back to the Bible. And so many financial lessons come from the Bible. You've written a recent book about this, A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance. All of you listening, make sure that you get a copy of that book. You can get it on wealthtalks.com. There's a link to the Amazon page or to our website at life-benefits.com. Also on wealthtalks.com, you can download the free study guide for this biblical guide to personal finance. We'll explore the truths that the Bible has to offer about money, and your life will be richer as a result. So you're listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Have a wonderful week.